looks like it's the downspout, dumping water right next to the house, or right next to the walkway. Walkway is pulling away. You see that a lot. That's something that can also be fixed. But we don't really, I mean, it's not really a structural problem. Sometimes for safety, home inspector will flag that. Those are your best friends, right? Home inspectors?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not one, so
You're safe.
I'm safe, yeah. So we just try to be honest. We don't try to, you know, find things that don't exist.
I have one last question.
Sure.
On piers.
I hope it's not the last question.
Well, before we move on to that. So,
Yeah.
so if you do have a foundational crack, and you're gonna put the piers in, is there a rule of thumb as to how far out?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Good question. So, lost all my markers. Here we go. So yeah, so how far do we space those piers is the question. How do you know, right? Well, the way to know is, first of all, engineering is going to be what will tell you. But the rule of thumb, let's say a newer home, okay? Home that's probably within 20 years old, we'll call it a newer home. Those piers are spaced every 6-7 feet apart and every 2-3 feet from the corner. So if this is the corner, we've got this cracked corner. We will do one here at 3 feet and one at 10 feet. That make sense? 10 feet. Let's say this isn't the scale, but let's say this is 17 feet here. 17 feet. We're going to do one at 3. Next one we'll go at 10. Next one will go right at 17. So they're spaced about every 6 to 7 feet apart. Okay? And from the corners, every 2 to 3 feet from the corners. Just because that corner does create a little bit of a weak spot in that footing. And so we're a little bit closer to the corners there. But yeah, so here's our house, front door, front porch, walkway, and we've got this corner that's settled. Everybody will price it differently, but to give you an idea, what would that cost? How many piers do we have there? 5, right? 5 times whatever, you know, a lot of companies do this. $1,200 to $1,600, that will tell you how much that will cost. Now there are some kickers. Some kickers are, when you drive that steel in, it can go really deep. What are some areas that go really deep, do you think?
Farther west.
Yeah. Who said that? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, they can go really deep. And so usually that range I'm giving you, because of all these companies that do it, $1,200 to $1,600, that's usually down to a depth of about 20 feet. We hope we hit 20 feet. We hope we hit bedrock at 20 feet. Now on 27th Street in Ogden, there's been piers that have gone down 100 feet. Washington Terrace, there's been piers that have gone down 160 feet. Great Salt Lake, there's been piers, not at the Great Salt Lake, but like Stansbury, almost 200 feet. So it can turn into a lot of money real quick. So any other questions on that? Does that make sense? This piers going down? They're going down until they're hitting some bedrock. Yes.
Homeowners insurance cover this, or is this out of pocket for the homeowner?
I will tell you from my personal experience, from our company doing repairs, we have not been paid by homeowners insurance. In a previous life, working with a different company, twice. And that was a leaky swamp cooler and a leaky hot tub. So, there's this cute saying, what are the insurance has to be like isolated, and there's a little phrase they say, has to be like this one-time event that happens. It can't be like this overtime thing. It has to be like something broke and it caused it. So it can't be ongoing. Typically, I'm not insurance, but that's usually what they say. So, and also with the foundation of your home, they don't like the help. I don't know, maybe they do, but typically we haven't found people get a lot of help on that. So. who pays for that? Out of pocket, you get turned into 80 grand sometimes on a huge, large home, that needs help, so. So what are some drawbacks of owning a home that has a basement?
Water coming in.
Why? See, that's it, I mean, yeah, that's it. Any other drawbacks?
Your kids never leave?
Kids never leave. Mother-in-law comes back.
You finish it.
Yeah.
Finish it.
Kids never leave. Maybe mother-in-law moves in. Cold, right? The main thing is water and flooding, right? We hope we're a little bit more comfortable here, right? Anybody had a basement that's flooded? Okay. Was it due to like plumbing or groundwater?
It's groundwater in my case.
Okay.
Broken pipe.
Broken pipe. Okay. Outside, like a sprinkler
Outside.
pipe? Okay.
Kids put the hose in the window.
Yeah.
They put a diving board in too.
When you're with your incidents, was it like a one-time storm that was just the storm of the century that caused it? Or had it been there maybe for years or months and you didn't know?
It was for years.
Yeah, something that is just like, maybe a bigger storm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about your situation? Was it coming through a crack maybe?
No,
Foundation
it was
crack?
it was my second home, I built 3 of them, but my second one, we just dug too deep.
Okay.
And
Water table.
so natural water table issues came up, and I put in a Zeller pump, and that thing would crank 3,000 gallons an hour,
Yeah.
and it would run consistently for probably 6 months of the year.
Saw it?
Yes, I did.
Didn't disclose it?
Yes, I did.
No.
And I put it in much better than
You gotta sell it in the fall when it's all dry, right? So, no, I mean, that's if you sell a house that has this train coming by, you gotta show it when the train's not going by, right? Yeah, and so where is that house located?
That one was in Syracuse.
Syracuse, okay. Yours was in Bountiful, okay. Any other basements leak?
We had, the city actually had a clogged storm drain.
Okay.
And so they overloaded the storm drains, like when you lifted up a manhole,
Yeah.
it was like this close to the street level.
Yikes,
And because we have the lowest basement on the block,
yeah,
the hydrostatic pressure just
yes,
fell in our basement.
okay. Wow, yeah, this seems more common, so. So we're gonna talk about water and drainage on this one. So some reasons, why would we worry about it, right? Why are we worried? We've got it finished, we've got maybe mold, right? That's another class, we don't get into all the mold, or someone else teaches that. Mold remediation and mildew and all that damage and all those things, structural damage, so sagging floors, your floor supports can decay, obviously your furniture, your belongings, and loss of that usable space. Anybody have a basement or know of somebody that has a basement, they can't use it, can't finish it? What's the deal, is it?
The east bench cement foundation, and there's an underground creek, and the cement just kind of leaches it, and they put in a French drain on the
Outside.
on the south side of the house, and they've sealed the cement, and over years and years, they just never got around it. So, I mean, it is a 100-year-old house too.
Ooh, okay. Ogden, East Bench? Yeah, that's a weird one. We get a lot of calls up there. It's just, there's so many, just all that water rushing off the side of that bench there, so. Went over that one. So what are some ways it comes in? Talked about the window wells, talked about water table, right? Tell me yours again, was it,
The patio was cracking, it was coming from the
It was-
patio, so they had
Okay.
to take everything down.
there was a crack,
Mm-hmm.
okay. What's some other ways it comes in?
Water pipes.
Yeah, broken pipes,
Well, around the water pipe coming in.
like the water main.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a common one, very common. So, all sorts of ways. We had the sump pump question before that we'll talk about. that water table, that's crucial. And you'll see a lot of this as you get closer or further west, closer to that big lake out there. Got our home, basement, house, whoops, sorry. Okay, and there, literally, right, you will see water table, water table. Water table is higher than the basement. And so water will fight to get in that thing like crazy. You'll see it. And so it usually will come underneath the footing, and this is why your friends on the bench in Ogden, they couldn't fix it. They're trying to fix it, they put membranes and everything. So when you have a water table problem, that water will go underneath that footing and creep in right at the joint where the slab meets the foundation. Real common issue. You go out to all your Harris Mills and all your, everything west, they have a lot of these issues. Some of these homes don't have basements, right? Anybody have a home that doesn't have a basement because of water table? Okay, you learned. Okay. No, but it's not true. I mean, it can be fixed. This can be dealt with. So, we talked about the drainage issues. We talked about your steps that are sinking, right? We want that grade. We want water running away from the house. This is pretty common sense, but we've got to keep water running away. We need a hill, right? We need some sort of a grade so that water is running away and not collecting next to the house. And if it is collecting, we create what's called a phantom water table, right? We create a water table in an area that should never have a water table. And that can be created by a grade like this, or a downspout. A downspout will just pour and pour water. You go down in the basement, you may be like on this bench where you shouldn't get water. Go down to the basement and there's water in the corner of the basement because of a downspout. We've created the problem, right? And so we know from the last class that if we can get the water away, we can prevent not only settling, but we can prevent water issues. Anybody seen the basement that looks like this?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What is this stuff called?
Leaching.
Leaching, what else could it be called? Efflorescence? That is the term, yeah. So this would indicate that we've got a lot of moisture in that basement. A lot of moisture, which probably a place that you're gonna get some mold, or you probably have a lot of water on the outside, probably that issue, where you've got water on the outside trying to get in. And so when they build a new foundation, as we talked about, do they do anything to that before they put the soil back? Build a big basement? Seen anything? Yeah, yeah, so they will do a asphalt emulsion seal and spray that basement or spray that foundation wall to prevent some of this stuff. Sometimes it doesn't, you got too much water and it can't prevent it. But this efflorescence will come in and it can break down some of the concrete, it can cause all sorts of issues. And that usually means there's water present. Is it on the other side of the wall? We don't know. It means we've got a lot of moisture there. So it's a white powdery substance beyond brick too that you'll see. And vapor is migrating through the material and leaving salt and mineral behind. So that's really what it is. When you see it, you know that there's water present. Okay, water table, we talked about it. What is a water table? Does it fluctuate?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So, and that, you know, I'm not here to defend builders, but I'm here to explain their point of view. Maybe they built two dozen homes in a neighborhood, and we had a dry year, and they dug, and there was no water. And then we have a year, and they could have been inches above that water table, maybe a foot below that, or above that water table. And then we get a lot of rain, and that water table rises to where it's all of a sudden higher than the floor, higher than the foundation, and water comes in. So sometimes it just takes a few rain, you know, it rains 3 times in a week and it floods, right? Or sometimes it rains for 6 hours, you know, if it rains for 5 hours, I don't get water in the basement. After hour 6, all of a sudden it just comes in, or whatever. And so that water table will continue to fluctuate. Depending on where you are, Sometimes it'll be, 10, 15, 20 feet below, sometimes it'll be 3 or 4 feet below. And then we talked about the false water table or that phantom water table, where we are creating that issue. I was looking at a home in Draper. This may explain some of those homes that are in Ogden on the bench. So I'm in Draper. And we've got this type of deal. And this is South Mountain. You got like the temple and all this stuff here. You got all these multi-million-dollar houses here. And not even a mile below, not even a half mile below it. Got all these houses here. And we're still, we're like at 5,000 feet, like we're still up. And these homes are flooding. I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, there's no way. Why are these houses flooding? So all this water that's running down here is collecting here and creating, neighbors told us that used to be a pond before they built homes. Water would run down the mountain and just create this little pond underneath these homes that are sitting at like 5,000 feet elevation. They're way, way, way up on the bench there, and they're getting water. So, and I think, a lot of that is, these homes in Ogden, right? So, got these homes here, and we're on that east bench in Ogden, and then somebody builds their basement like that. They've got their footings, and the house comes up, house. So we've got all this water. Some of it is on the surface, some of it's below the surface, but when it runs downhill, it hits here, and what does it do? It'll fill it up. So it's all running downhill, hits these basements, fills it up, and there's a lot of issues. And from experience, we've done a lot of work on that area in Ogden, a lot of flooding. So where are the high water table areas in Utah, would you say?
Out west.
Out west, for sure, right? Can you name some of these?
Syracuse, even Plain.
Farmington Ranches.
Hooper.
West
Woods
Haven.
Cross.
Okay, so I don't even need to go through these stars, because I can basically say anything west of I-15, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Pretty fair.
So, yeah, we get west of I-15, there's about 24 cities out there, I don't know all their names. They're, your Far West, your Sunset, your Clinton, your Clearfield, your Layton, all of those cities out there, they can have issues. So this isn't based necessarily towards Weber County, but Rose Park.
Yeah.
You guys are starting out, you may be doing work in Rose Park. It's a joke, guys, come on. So. West Haven. A lot of new developments out there. A lot of developments where the builders just don't even try on the basements. You seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Lehigh, we deal with a lot of that. Ogden Bench, we talked about that issue. Saratoga Springs, we did talk about that in the last class. Yeah, so what's the commonality with like Lehigh and Rose Park? What do we got there? So let's think. We've got this big river that connects these two. And so if you get down, any of those homes as you go from like 123rd South in the Salt Lake Valley all the way to 7200 South, you've got this big gully that's where the river bottom is. A lot of those homes have a lot of issues. So, and then west of I-15, right? Okay, anybody live there? Flooding? Do you have a basement?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, neighbors have basements, neighbors flood or no?
No.
No? Okay. Sometimes you'll see them, they'll build up the house, build it up a little bit higher. So it's got like full windows, and those windows don't even have window wells, but when you walk into the house, you're kind of walking upstairs, up steps to get into the house, because they're trying to avoid this issue. And you'll drive around and you'll see like, oh yeah, this is obvious now. They've built these homes up so there's no water issues. So what is a flood zone and why is it important? anybody dealt with on a transaction, a purchase, helping somebody sell?
Typically, they're places that have retained water or water flows to over long periods of time.
Mhm. Has that affected anyone's ability to purchase a home?
Insurance is
Yeah,
scary.
flood insurance, right?
There's usually building restrictions as well.
Yeah, things that we can't do in those particular areas because of the flood zone. So I mean, can that affect your transaction at all?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you thought you were getting this house, it's gonna be $1,200 a month, and now you've got $400 or $500 worth of flood insurance every month. And that can really push somebody out of a purchase, easy, right? So flood zone, FEMA will determine which areas are floodplains or flood zones. Buyers will face additional insurance costs and potentially higher mortgage interest rates. So if you're in a flood zone, you're probably gonna look at some additional costs. And I don't know every flood zone, I mean, they can vary from neighborhood to neighborhood. I mean, if you're close to the Jordan River, you may be required to get flood insurance. If you're close to like Saratoga Springs, where some of those homes are really close to Utah Lake, they may be required to get flood insurance. But I mean, it's important to know, because if you're helping someone try to buy these homes and all of a sudden, you know, they've got an additional $500 a month they're gonna have to pay, that could be a problem. Did all that work and it's not gonna turn into a sale. So floods, what should you know when living in Utah? What, anybody remember this at all?
Yeah, downtown Main Street.
See, I was pretty young when this happened. You can see the bell bottoms I think she's got. What year was this?
About 76.
1982?
82, I think it was I think this particular picture. 82, maybe 83. Hearing a lot of, I think it was 82. Well, maybe 83. I kind of remember it,
I have
but
a chart of working out here, so I know it's 1982.
okay. Yeah, I had not, maybe not fully come through the veil when that happened. So, but yeah, I mean, I know stories. You got City Cemetery up here, and there were caskets washing down State Street. Is that true?
True.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So, have there been other rain years since then that might be big time like that?
Up in Logan, was a pilot, it was 2011, I was flying and it looked like rice paddies out in the valley.
Yeah.
It was really wet that year.
2011? Yes, correct.
St. George.
Yeah, do you remember that? Backs of homes were right along the Virgin River, were falling apart. So there used to, anybody know where Thistle is?
Yeah.
The Thistle is gone pretty much, right? When that 1982 or 83 storm happened. Yeah, so whole neighborhoods just, it changed a lot. And so as we talked about in the other class, a lot of settling could have happened, maybe not right during that year, but maybe after things started to dry out a little bit, as that bearing
That
capacity
wasn't
was
rain, though,
lost
that
in
was
that
snow
storm.
runoff.
What's that?
That was snow melt.
Snow,
guys.
this was all snow melt?
Yeah, you couldn't, if one rainstorm, you wouldn't build the bridges and stuff. It'd have to go for months.
Right, yeah, so everything, all the melt was causing like all of these, like Jordan River, all these rivers to kind of overflow and spill, because we had a lot of snow in the winter.
That was City Creek.
That was similar, I think, so 2011 was kind of a little bit of both. I mean, we had a lot of snow, and then it just rained for days and days, and all these bodies of water were just overflowing like crazy, for sure. So what are some things that can be done? We talked about some of this. What can we do? We talked about a sump pump, right? Anybody have a sump pump? Basement, does it turn on?
I don't use it. I have a day in it now, so I've never had to use it.
Okay. What are some things, what can we do? Any ideas?
Perimeter drains.
Perimeter drains, inside, outside perimeter drains?
Mounding,
Say that again?
mounding, where you
Yeah, build up the
Build up.
landscape. Yeah, absolutely. How high up can we go on that, right? we can only go up to the top of that foundation wall. Does that make sense? You can't really go up to the stucco or the brick or whatever, because then you'll create other issues, and we see those issues too. So new foundations, this process that was mentioned, that asphalt emulsion product, that's called damp proofing. A lot of municipalities require this as part of the building code. Extending the downspouts, this is just a corrugated pipe that will extend and run those downspouts away. A lot of times, folks, to be honest, quite honest, that is the problem. I mean, just the drainage from these downspouts can prevent a lot of these basement flooding issues. Even if you are in a floodplain, or even if you are in a high water table, not adding to it is good advice. Don't add to the water by having all this water dumped next to the foundation. Extend it out from the home. You said mounding, right? So, increasing that grade so that we don't have water, running towards the house, so it's running away from the house. We'll talk about sump pumps. A few things. Let's get into here. Let me show you a quick little. So this is pretty common issue. We build a new home, and all of a sudden we've got this new home that has these flooding issues. Why does that happen? I mean, there's a number of reasons. We talked about compaction in the last class. So the first thing that happens, we dig this big hole, and then we pour our footings and our foundation wall, and then we put all the dirt back. Well, the problem that happens once we put that dirt back is it's not the same as that virgin soil that was originally there, okay? So you can see the difference here. You've got all this virgin soil and all this fill dirt or active soil. And so when it rains a lot, that water really likes to trail down and follow that active soil because it's not compacted to the same level as this virgin soil. So when you move into your new home, you'll see all that landscaping they put in, it just kind of sinks after a while. So that's what happens. All this water will follow down that active soil, and it can create that phantom water table that we talked about and allow water into a basement. So one thing that we can do here, and there's perimeter drains. You can put a drain here on the outside, or there's one here that goes on the inside that is the same as like a French drain on the outside, but it's done from the inside. Can be pretty invasive. And so what that drain will do is it will collect all this water and just extend the reach of a sump pump. This is the pump pumps it out. And so that's one solution. It's pretty common, but maybe 10, 15 years ago, the idea was, well, let's put in a sump pump, and all of a sudden it's raining on the and the other side of the house is flooding, and now we put a sump pump in on the other side of the house. Well, and I've been in homes that have 3, 4 sump pumps. Anybody been in a home? They've got several sump pumps all over the place. And so that drain, that interior drain, will go around the perimeter of that home, collect the water, and just extends the reach of a sump pump. So you're not needing, 3 or 4 or 5 sump pumps. Because the idea, when the water table rises, it's not necessarily going to run evenly inside of the home. Okay? Home, basement, sump pump. So a lot of times builders, and this is what's done in Saratoga Springs, and it's not working. They will put in a bunch of gravel. This is my gravel. 30 inches of gravel, and then that's where all the soil starts. And so the thought is, when the water table rises, that's going to prevent settling, and it's going to make the water run evenly. It does help, but the water doesn't necessarily run evenly to that sump pump. Sometimes, when that water table rises, if the sump pump is low enough, it'll pump out the water before it gets into the house. but that drain will allow water to run up around the footing and into the drain. And like I said, it will extend the reach of that sump pump. So you don't need 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 sump pumps. You only just need the one. Anybody have like maybe French drains around the perimeter of their home? Does that seem to work as well? And so when they build, usually older homes don't have a lot of this stuff. But yeah, on a newer home, they'll put corrugated piping around the perimeter of the home. So when that water does collect, it goes into that French drain. What is a French drain? What does that mean?
Well, I had one built on my Syracuse home, and I took all my downspouts, connected them, and ran it out beyond my home. And we basically took an excavator, dug down to the water table, backfilled out with mesh netting, 3/4 minus, and we routed all the water there. So in essence, moved it away from the house.
Did it seem to help?
Well,
work?
it did until I found out that I had a neighbor connecting into it underneath his RV pad
Nice.
onto my property, which was a liability there, so, but yes, it did.
Okay. So these are some options, things that can be done.
How deep should your French drains go?
That's a great question. A lot of people will have them sit on top of the footing of the home. The problem is I drew out before is that water, if it's sitting on top of the footing, the water table will rise, and the water that's in the middle of the home, it's not gonna get into that French drain. It will come up through those floor cracks that we talked about in the last class. Those floor cracks will see water coming up through them. And so the deeper the better would be the guideline. That example that we showed you in the video has those French drains, or interior French drains sitting on top of the footing. And so it's really allowing the water to almost come up, and right before it comes into the house, goes into those drains and goes to that sump pump. So some people will do like a spray paint over the wall as a sealant, or maybe wrap the basement with a membrane, or wrap the exterior of a home with a membrane. Like epoxy injection, people know what that is, injecting epoxy into cracks. It works well. Sometimes what we see is you inject that hard resin, that hard epoxy into a crack, and that home just settles just ever so slightly, just like a 1/16 of an inch, and it will break that seal, and it can allow water to come in after the fact. So crawl spaces, a lot of crawl spaces will have this membrane, which will actually lower the humidity in that crawl space, or even wrapping the inside. You can wrap the inside of a basement and connect that membrane into that interior French drain. Sump pumps, like we said, that's kind of that image of a sump pump connecting into an interior French drain. Any questions on that? We're about done. We're not though, we've got 20 minutes, so.
Just a comment, you were talking earlier about active and inactive soils.
Yeah.
And I've had 2 occasions where people have built homes, the water table was incredibly deep. And they're over what used to be old orchards. And the main irrigation flow lines have now got got active soil in them. And water will find its way into those old ditches and actually seep down and come right, if you're built too close to them, get right into your foundation soil.
Yeah, so, and I've seen that with some of the exterior French drains as well, is they'll clog, or they won't allow the drainage after a few years. Builders put them in, and a lot of times they can clog, and not provide the drainage that they're supposed to. And so, but yeah, some of these areas, a lot of the builders, when they're building these homes, like I said, it's the same with those foundation issues. You can build in a year that has that water table lower than what the homes are built at, and then that water table changes. So, just gonna go back to one. So this is a product here, where it will actually, so we talked about foundation cracks, right? We all know why they appear. So one way, so here's our basement, we've got a window in the basement. Where do we see a lot of these cracks sometimes? Out of the corner, right? Sometimes you'll see that, sometimes you'll see that. Do they leak?
No.
Yes, no, sometimes they will. And so if they leak, a lot of times, kind of the old school of thought was, I'm gonna just inject that with that epoxy, or inject it with that resin, and seal off these cracks, and make sure water doesn't come in. Well, hydrostatic pressure is pretty strong. And like I said, if that continues to settle just a smidge, it's gonna cause water to come through here, usually at the bottom first. And so if we can do kind of a 3D drawing. So one way that is used quite a bit is sealing this crack with a product called Zypex or some sort of a hydraulic cement, and then putting a wick over the top of it, or a strip of foam. We're talking open cell foam. I don't know if you can see that very well. Like an open cell foam that has some sponge to it. And so when the water comes in, it will wick onto this piece of foam, and everybody says, well, where does it go? So you can notch out a portion of that basement, run that foam underneath the floor, and then re-pour the concrete there. And so you're sealing it, but you're actually adding a backup in case water does come through. It will wick that water underneath the floor, and after it does that, you can seal that foam with a polyurethane so it's not wet to the touch. So that's a process that's used quite a bit actually, and a lot of companies do that now, and that can prevent any sort of foundation crack from leaking in the future. So any crawl spaces, anybody deal with homes that have crawl spaces? Okay. Typically, as we said before, that's usually a reason that there is a crawl space, because they couldn't build a full basement. And so they couldn't build a full basement, so a lot of times you're gonna have high levels of moisture in that crawl space. And so to be able to keep that moisture down, what's called encapsulation, or putting that membrane all the way around that crawl space, will allow for the moisture level to drop so that there's not any humidity on those floor joists or causing any sort of erosion to the wood. So that can happen a lot as well. So. Hey guys, I think we're about done. Any other questions? Come on, I'm gonna make it a rule, no questions after class. Everybody's afraid to ask, and then when we get them alone, everybody will ask. Yeah, most of these repairs that we talked about, they carry warranties. Easy to fix. A lot of companies, not just ours, do this repair. And but yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to do. The floodplain is one that came up in the last class of you know, how do I determine where the floodplain is? That's going to change. So you do want to check with FEMA on that. It'll change year to year. And so if you are selling west of I-15, which I know a lot of you are, you're going to want to know if that is included as part of the area that they're selling.
If you're raising like sidewalks or something, what's the injection that goes in, what's that process?
So there's people that will inject, you can inject concrete under a sidewalk,
Is that what it is? Concrete
or you
itself?
can inject a polyurethane underneath there, which is a foam, underneath there to lift and level a sidewalk. Like this gentleman mentioned, you know, your walkway starts to kind of walk away from the house, or it starts to settle. You can inject it's a 2-part polyurethane that will actually expand and lift that up. The old school of thought was injecting concrete, which is called mud jacking. Familiar with that process? You drill a hole, you inject concrete underneath it to lift it up. What has been learned after that, though, is when you lift it up, you're injecting heavy concrete under heavy concrete. And now you've made that slab sometimes twice as heavy, and it wants to go down again, and so.
Especially if you don't fix the water problem.
I was just gonna
caused
say,
it in the
yeah.
first place.
If you don't fix the issue, you're gonna continue to have sinking and settling, because, you know, all that does is fill up and lift that slab and kind of puts back the fill that was under there, but it's gonna continue to erode away if you have water, so. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people will have us do that to create slope away from their house, because your homes were built, you had driveways that are up against the home that kind of have this nice slope that created this grade running away from the house. Well, after a few years, that can drop and settle and level out, and now you've got puddling next to the home. You've got homes that are flooding that never flooded before, so, very good. Anything else? Other questions? Okay. You guys have been, best class I've had all day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let us know if you have any other questions, and, thanks for coming.
Thank you.